April 12th, 2023 meeting of the Poolsville Planning Commission. On the agenda, no citizens' comments, I believe, since there's nobody here and no Zoom. So, any announcements from the staff?
Just, welcoming Chuck, to the planning commission. Outside of that, we have a couple of things that will probably come back next month, including the Bricken property, as they have to go to the Parks Board to talk about parks. And then we might have the townhouses come back with their preliminary plan, although we shall see. They were communicating about that as well, so.
Very good. Anything from the commissioners?
The only announcement I have from the last commissioner meeting was somebody had the good idea to include in the comprehensive plan, and maybe it's already going to be in there, redevelopment. Because there's going to be some places in town, like some of our townhomes are not doing well structurally. And I think at some point down the road, there's going to have to be, that's going to be addressed, and redevelopment should be something that's included in there, so.
Yeah, so we'll get into it.
Yeah, and we'll discuss that. That's part of what we'll talk about with the land use chapter. Also, one thing that also came from a discussion with Wade and a little bit with Wallace Montgomery is discussion about uses, agricultural uses that are more related to green energy and things like that, and maybe incorporating that in the land use chapter as well. So we'll talk about that a little bit more as well, but that's also from the commissioners' meeting.
I always get asked to, about when do you think you'll be done? So if you could update me on just a guess.
Sure. I'll come up here.
Yeah, thank you.
Start talking.
We can. I mean, we're not there yet, right? We
Yeah,
can- we can
let's
ask that
let,
question.
yeah, let's, why don't we have their
This
discussion?
is just for announcements. So,
Yeah, 'cause
Yeah.
those are part of mine.
and then of course I have my own announcement, but
Yeah.
Niles stole my
Oh,
thunder.
I apologize.
Welcome back. Technically, I guess none of us were here on the planning commission when you were here before, but if I was very short of a lap, yeah, it's true. Sorry. So in that case, welcome back. Good to see you, Chuck. All right. Is everybody? The three of us can do this, right? Did we were all here. Chance to read the minutes of the March meeting, March 15th. Any questions, comments, or edits?
No, I looked it over, and I will motion to accept the minutes from March 15th.
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. And on to old business. I have a feeling the master plan, comprehensive plan discussion, which is the only thing technically on the agenda, is going to be an in-depth conversation. Maybe we'll have the Poolsville Green go first.
Yeah.
If you guys want to come up.
Sure.
So there's Poolsville Green.
Oh, sorry, sustainable.
Independent 501c3 nonprofit, and there's Sustainable Poolsville, which would you like?
Well, Sustainable Pools is the only one I have any idea about. I have a feeling I know why you're here, but we spoke with Poolsville Green, so this is really the only thing. If you want to
You
have
spoke with who?
Sustainable Poolsville, what'd I say? Did I say it backwards again?
Yes, you did.
I know there's a difference. I mix my kids up too, so I only have two of them. Sustainable Poolsville, you're welcome to comment, but since we don't really have an agenda item for you, then,
Well, I just have public comment.
Yeah.
okay.
So,
Very
yeah,
good.
you can, why don't you go first
Okay.
and speak, and then they can.
It is. The 1 month it happens.
Yeah. It's like what is it, the Stonehenge thing. You want this?
Yeah, and press the button and then just state your name and address.
Sure, Joyce Briner, 2 Hackett Court, Poolsville, and I'm here representing Poolsville Green, 501c3 nonprofit. I just wanted to make some general comments about what I think maybe you'll hear later from the Sustainable Poolsville folks. I am on that committee, but I am speaking independently at this point. And I don't have any real, fancy prepared comments, but what I do want to say is emphasize that that you need to, that the planning commission needs to really keep the environment in consideration of your decisions. And really in all the decisions throughout the town, there's a thread. If you really look, most decisions, even do I have bottled water available for my meetings, every decision can come back to climate or the environment. So I would encourage you to work towards that, keeping that in mind, and using Sustainable Poolsville Committee as a resource on a regular basis. Not just the Planning Commission, but all of the committees in the town. I was thinking back earlier today. The first time I sat in this chair was in 2009, when I started talking about climate change and the town taking action and considering what the decisions they were making in light of that situation. I've seen some good things happen, and I've seen some things that I'm not so crazy about. But I encourage you to keep this in mind. It's not going to get any easier. It's going to get tougher. Some people still don't understand that, but a lot of people do. In the recent weeks, the latest report from the IPCC has come out. I personally haven't had a chance to review it yet, but the word is not good. The message is not good. And I encourage you at a minimum, to look at the executive summary of that document. We are at a critical time in humanity. And so every decision that an individual makes, a household makes, a town makes, a county makes, a state makes, a United States makes, the globe makes, have impact. And I hope that you'll consider that in the future.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joyce.
Do you have any questions before she leaves? No? Okay. Okay, Sustainable Poolsville.
Thanks for having us back, even though.
Yeah, and just for the record, your name and addresses.
Danny Embry, 19908 Brightwell Crossing Lane, Poolsville, Maryland, 20837.
And Marcus Rauschicker, 19906 Brightwell Crossing Lane, Poolsville, Maryland. We are next door neighbors.
So, thank you so much for having us back. When I was here last afterwards, I obviously went back, spoke to the committee, and we kind of went through what I proposed at the previous meeting, the non-voting advisory board to Planning Commission, really all boards for the town. And as we kind of talked through it, we formed a subcommittee, and from there we had a conference call with the head of Sustainable Maryland. Also spoke to Cindy from Middletown. And through talking with Mike, he brought up a lot of great ideas. And one that I think in the previous meeting, Wade's concern was, well, how do we get named as this non-voting advisory board? Everyone, I think, kind of responded. I think it was kind of a, new idea. So everyone was kind of trying to get their minds around it, hence us being back here today. So we did our due diligence, and, we're trying to solve for how we can best exist in the plan, through this update. And Mike, when we spoke to him, enlisted students, he's at University of Maryland, to review comp plans for multiple municipalities in the state of Maryland. And he came back to us with Rockville, Gaithersburg, Middletown. These are municipalities that have sustainability as an element in their comprehensive plan, or people appointed to help with the effort of sustainability. So through that, we were able to then reach out to Middletown, we felt was the best fit because it's similar to Poolsville. And, you know, they provided us with the 23-page addition they made to their comp plan as the sustainable element of the plan. So, you know, through that conversation, it was exciting because, you know, we found how we could exist. I mean, we can exist as an element added to the plan. And, you know, that to me was great news because I felt like we needed to give you guys examples of how and where. The thing that I felt positive about is that, you know, in our plan and the updated version, obviously none of us have seen a draft of it, but in the vision statement, it says sustainable, right? And we exist, this, you know, the Sustainable Poolsville Committee. So the town is behind this idea. And, you know, for me, I'm a financial planner, right? So when I meet with a high net worth individual who has estate tax issues, well, I'm not a specialist in that area. So I refer them to a estate planning attorney and we work together to act in the best interest of the client. Well, we exist for the town's sake to provide sustainable guidance. You know, our group first came to exist to achieve a certification. But I think, you know, where we are today, that we didn't exist in December of 2011 and now we do. And we know other communities have in their comp plan a sustainable element. I think we need to hopefully come to the specialists in this subject area and allow us to help you guys in writing the sustainable element for the plan update. I mean, like Joyce said, look, NVIDIA, Microsoft, Bank of America. I mean, you look at the list, U.S. corporations, this is at the forefront of everyone's mind. It's an inevitable thing. Whether we decide to lead from the ag, you know, we're in the middle of 23,000 acres, or no, 93,000 acres. And so for me, I view it as almost an inherent responsibility for us to lead here. Or we could just wait for the state of Maryland to say it's the way things are, and then we adopt it. But I think that's not the way we exist here at Poolsville. I think it's important to all of us. And that's why, again, it's going to be placed in the vision statement. But what I'm worried about is if it's stated in the vision statement, but there's no action plan, no way of achieving this vision, then we have this empty word. And that's not what we want. So, you know, I think what I'm asking today is, we've discovered something that can be achieved because other communities in the state of Maryland are doing it. For you all to support this idea, from here, what we'll do is we will provide you these examples that we've found through our process of doing due diligence, and we can initiate the process. We're not looking to write 23 pages, right? We're just looking to provide an element in this update that will serve us in the next 5 to 7 years to act on that vision statement. And, you know, we've got people like Marcus and Soledad that's the three of us are the subcommittee. And we have unique backgrounds to work on this effort. We would send it to you all. And then from there, I mean, you know, we give us our feedback. And I mean, that's kind of how I envision this process going. But that's my thoughts. And I guess, Marcus, do you want to?
I mean, thank you, Danny. I think you summed it up really well. You know, it's clear that Poolsville cares about sustainability. We know this. I mean, we see the banner up here, that we're part of Sustainable Maryland Certified. The banner's hanging proudly in this room. We know it's part of the vision for the upcoming comprehensive plan. It's clearly stated that sustainability is a priority for the town. But I think what we're saying is that we hope that this upcoming plan will incorporate something that helps the town actualize that vision. We need something in the plan that points to the the resource that the town has, the Sustainable Poolsville Committee, to provide advice on sustainability issues. And, in that sense, we, like Danny said, we went out and we did some research to see how this has been done in other municipalities. And we've seen examples from, larger municipalities like Rockville and Gaithersburg, which have, huge sections on what their towns are doing for the environment. We're obviously not looking to do that for Poolsville. That doesn't make any sense. But, when we look at a town like Middletown, that comes a little bit closer to a valid comparison. And, what they're doing is commendable in terms of, like Danny said, including just an element, a direct, talking specifically about what the town is doing on sustainability. And so we're here to, I guess, advocate for a similar approach for our Poolsville Comprehensive Plan, to say, look, we have this vision to make sure that that we're doing what we need to be doing for sustainability in Poolsville. I think we all share that vision, but it's a matter of operationalizing that vision. And so we're here to advocate for, an element in the comprehensive plan to address that. And like Danny said, we'd be happy to provide our input on what that should look like, but ultimately, obviously, it's up to you what that content looks like. But we're here to help in any way that we can.
I will quickly just say that this is what we've been asking for all along, really. We asked over a year ago, right? But it's how the conversation got started with Danny and Wallace Montgomery, is because we asked for some input from Sustainable Poolsville. So this is welcome. You have to advocate as far as, I think I'm speaking for everybody here, as far as this committee is concerned, this is what we want. So, whatever it is, we've received a draft of something that somebody thought should go into the comprehensive plan, and we've looked at that, and that may very well make it in its original form, or it may get edited, and we would love to have the same thing from you guys. You don't want us to write it, I can tell you that. So yes, please. Any other comments?
Actually,
Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
So I think it's a great idea to have a chapter on sustainability, and I appreciate you guys being here and everything you're doing. I would caution you, though, I think one thing, about comprehensive plans, and you probably know this, and this is probably redundant, but, I believe, if I'm speaking out of turn, Michael, let me know, but you don't want to put anything in there too specific, like, Poolsville must have, like regulations. It's more of a guiding document.
For sure.
But yeah, I think that's a great idea, and, I think that we all, like Brian said, would welcome that kind of a chapter.
First off, thank you guys so much for coming back. I think the comments that you provided tonight have really helped to clarify, in my mind, what's going on. Because when you had first come last month, Danny, my thought was, where is the breakdown? Like, where is the breakdown? Why do you feel like you're not being heard? And when you gave us our comments, I had this aha moment. It's because you've been feeding us information, and we've been taking it all in and collecting it, but how much information have you gotten back? How much have you seen that we have actually incorporated and taken your ideas in and put those into, you haven't seen them yet. No wonder you're feeling unseen and unheard and that you're not part of this process, because we have not given you any feedback. And I am so sorry that you have not gotten any feedback. I don't know how to rectify that, but perhaps,
So just to go back, so obviously Wallace Montgomery has been drafting the plan and such, and I can tell you just right now, there's a section on environmental resources and sensitive areas that includes what you guys submitted as recommendations for the comprehensive plan. So that is in there, and what we might want to do is first get your examples, because that might help us to look at what we are doing, and then sort of see what we've done, and so that we're not duplicating work. And then maybe circulate something back that shows what we've already taken, what you've submitted, and then what more do you need? And then we can kind of send you back, this is what has been said, and this is what has been done. Since, we had what you submitted as specific recommendations for the comp plan, and we've taken that, and that's part of the chapter that we'll talk about tonight. But then also building out what else are we talking about here? So, because it starts from what you submitted, and then we can go from there.
Yes, I just thought, I heard your comments, and I'm thinking a lot of what you are saying or alluding to is in the document that's sitting in front of me that I've been reviewing for the last couple of days. And so, again, I understand your frustration, or at least I understand that I would have been frustrated. But I hope that we can set up a better collaboration to get you all's feedback for especially like Chapter 9, which is environmental resources in sensitive areas.
Yeah, we're not frustrated. We're just making sure that we help the cause as much as possible. And so the fact that there's a chapter already within the plan is a big positive, and the fact that what we, have provided as ideas,
Yeah.
back when we originally spoke, probably 18 months ago, at this point, is been brought into consideration. That's a big positive. And again, to Lexi's point, that we were not, and you guys didn't communicate that when I was here a month ago. So that's good information to have. And I think, we'll definitely provide more, especially now because, again, we've got other municipalities that we can pull from. We don't have to invent the wheel. We'll just take their best ideas potentially. And I agree with what you're saying, Martin. We don't want to get too micro because this is all changing so much. We can talk at a macro level of what Poolsville intends to do as it continues to develop. I think that's a big win, right? So that's, I think, what we're looking
Now,
for.
the question is, this chapter, like Lexi pointed out, deals with a lot of environmental
Yes.
stuff. But we could almost give them a separate chapter for sustainability. I mean, it seems like they're not totally the same thing.
Well, it depends. So that's part of why I think it's best to see what their examples are, right? Because again, the idea is, I took the entire what we have so far of the entire plan so far, and it's 68 pages, right? So what we want to do is make sure that we're not duplicating efforts or figuring out. So if we have a separate idea of what sustainability is, then maybe we do it. Or do we rename this chapter or look at ways of incorporating it so that it fits what we're doing? That's just the thought that comes to my mind in the scope when we were talking before about macro and micro, in terms of how we're constructing it. And that's just my thought. And so if we start from, okay, this is what you guys are thinking about and this is what we have, then we can come back to both committees and say, here's what we have, and we can then construct what we need going forward. So
I think last month we got a little derailed with the concept of having ad hoc board member. You know what I mean? And I think that took our focus away from really the immediate thing, because you said that there were some discussions at the commissioners level about this.
So that mainly focused on this question of how to make sure that there's cross communication. So especially with the liaisons. So
Right.
with Ed and with Martin and with Jeff and Sarah, when they're reporting back to the various committees, that's a good opportunity for to be shared across. So how can we best share across the information? So in Sustainable Poolsville, like the composting, for example, right? So Sustainable Poolsville's been talking about composting. Well, I'm not sure how much that will have a direct effect on the comp plan per se, but it could be something that the Planning Commission might have a commentary on or just want to know. And so it's pulling those information across. So that was the conversation at the commissioners' meeting, but we can also kind of look at ways of communicating and sort of doing all of those different things. So.
I agree with all that, and I'm happy to liaison information back, but I would say that, nothing beats you guys coming in and telling us what's going on, telling us what you're thinking, like giving us recommendations like that, rather than playing telephone where, you tell somebody, and then, it's best if you guys come in, and it probably doesn't need to be every month, I'm sure, but like a few times a year when you have something that's important that you want to talk about, you're always welcome here, sign up for comment and, or call ahead and get put on the agenda.
No, definitely. And to me, obviously, we've been talking about this for 18 months now, or however long it's been, knowing that we were going through a comp plan update. Obviously, kind of a unique time frame because of COVID, because there's no real defined deadline. It's just as long as you guys are working on it, we're okay. So that's what's led to it taking as long as it has, which I think is probably a positive thing because it's given us a lot of time. It's given us the opportunity to weigh in a lot more. You know, so that all was true. And then, you know, when we have a group of parents come to us and talk to us about shredded tires in the parks and how that's exposing our kids to lead and how the cost to replace it is $90,000. And we're like, wow, if we had, and I know that's parks, but if we had maybe been able to give an opinion about that, maybe we could have prevented all of the above. So I think, you know, the sustainable element perhaps could allow better communicate. I mean, that will allow us to maybe exist more so than we do at this point. And I think that would be a huge win for the town if not just us have more of say, but all committees communicating better together, right? So, I mean,
I will say one thing that would be helpful, and I don't mean to put work in your guys' lap, but like, if you all could monitor what's going on, like you keep coming back to the shredded tire thing, which is a great example.
Yeah.
Like if somebody can kind of like tune in on YouTube to the parks meetings, like not very few of these things happen like, you know, on a dime. Like it's usually a process,
I get
especially when it's that kind of money. So like if you know take turns like watching the meetings or whatever, that would be huge. I mean, you know, you probably don't want to come to them, but you know they're not the most exciting. But you know, like if you guys are up on that, because you know, somebody came to me and said, hey, wait a second, like, you know, I think that the Parks Board is about to make a big mistake or whatever. I mean, you know, the Parks Board themselves would handle that, and you know, I know they're open-minded and they would have looked into it, and
for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you. It just, when that was brought up, I'm like, wow, you know, what a headache. And the amount of money that they're talking about, I'm like, but that could have probably been easily avoided, so I don't know. But so from here, I guess we'll work on drafting our element, our contribution. We'll also provide you, I was gonna do printouts, but 23 times however many, that's not really sustainable, right? So we'll email it all to you guys.
Appreciate that.
So you can take a look at, you know, what some other municipalities are doing,
Yeah.
and then we'll
The
follow it
Rock-
up with
you can do
our version.
The Rockville. You said
Rockville,
Rockville.
Gaithersburg,
Okay, you can
Middletown.
get those to us.
Yep.
For sure.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then maybe we can get it to Michael just so
Yeah.
he has them to take a look.
We can take care of that. Just make sure you email me and I'll take care of it.
Is there a,
And I don't want to put words in your mouth, Michael, but I suspect this is all already on your radar.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I'll get into that in a minute, and actually Danny and I have had some conversations offline.
Oh, good.
Yep.
He's had several with Larry Marcus before I was on board, and in fact, we had a long conversation. That you were initially gonna be here 2 months ago, and I think we chatted like the day before, so I was a
Yeah.
little surprised when you weren't here, cause I was anticipating,
Yeah,
and then you ended up presenting last month.
Right.
So we've had conversation, we've reviewed the documents relative to the element that we were doing tonight, and then I'll get into some more details. once I get that.
So, just, so I understand, Danny's been able to see some of the stuff we've been working on, some of the
I don't know
chapters.
if he was copied.
No.
I don't think
No.
he's copied on what we
And-
sent out for
And
Other way around. Whatever Danny shared with Michael
Is going into the-
is in the draft. That's partially how that.
Okay, but I'm just,
I'll go into more detail.
okay, I just, we can have a discussion when you come up, I guess, but is there an issue with sharing, why can't Sustainable Pools see our
So
progress?
I don't think there's necessarily an issue with that. I think it's more just making sure that it's done in a process where it's your document. It's the planning commission's document. So the thought process has been to share the chapters with you, to get your feedback, and then revise, right? So if we want it to be, like we have this chapter already, for example, you guys have looked at it, I know, you have some comments. From that, we could take it and then potentially go through a process where we share it with sustainability. They can have their comments, and then we go from there. Like, it's just a matter of how we want the process to go, so that the planning commission is in the driver's seat of how we're doing it.
I mean, if there is the potential for us to see what's already been drafted, then we could work off of that and make sure that whatever we come up with is in line with the document you already have.
So I think if we're getting input, before we put the elements together, and then we draft something, if we get a chance to review it, then I think that's probably a good time, after our thoughts are, when it's a little, the next stage of completeness, you get your input, we put our input into it, it gets to a draft state, then we share it and make sure it's right.
Yeah, and I think I might have mentioned this last month when I was speaking, and you might have left the meeting by that point, because I think we were the last item.
Yeah.
But what I was saying last time, and which is true, I mean, this could be other groups as well,
Mhm.
right? Or stakeholders
Yep.
within the community, right? So it is absolutely helpful if there are other plans, other documents, other policies that have already been developed that we want to look at in light of the plan. So whatever those are, we love to collect them, and as we go through the plan, look at them and then integrate. So sometimes it may, not all of what you're talking about tonight would end up in one chapter, it could be several different chapters, right? So as we talked about, you just made that point, Niles, like, once we have the draft, then we need to look at, like, where
Right.
does it actually go? So it's all
Right.
kind of in a draft form until we get to the end.
Right. So my thought, I mean, this is working at two purposes at once, right? So my thought is for you guys to send us the examples that you've already found, right? Because then we can see what we're missing and what we don't have and how to do it. Then we could take that, share what we have and sort of work from that way. And that was just the way that I was thinking about it, but we can also share with you what we have right now and work that way as well. It's up to what the planning commission wants to do in terms of what order we do it or how we want to do it. My thought was just to get your input in terms of examples now so that we can incorporate it in what's drafted, but
The examples we've found from other municipalities, I mean, they're very informative and they're helpful for reference, but they certainly, we couldn't adopt them
Right.
no.
as they are. They would need to be tailored to
Of course,
Poolesville.
yeah.
So, we'll obviously share the examples
Yeah.
that we've been able to come up with, but with the caveat that, this is not exactly how
Sure.
we would envision it looking for
It-
Poolesville.
And that wasn't my
Yeah.
my intent to do that. It's just to try to get a sense of the landscape of what you might be thinking about.
And if in any of those plans, there's something that sticks out to you that you would like to,
Highlight.
highlight, make sure that something like that is included in ours, please. Commentary on top of that would be great.
Great. Is
As
there
far as I'm
a
concerned.
time frame for when you would like to see this?
My thought is as soon as possible. So
Yeah.
as soon as you can get something to us, it
Yeah.
allows us to turn it
I
around
was
to
like-
do it. And that's my view.
I'll
But
email you
Yeah.
what I have tomorrow.
that's perfect. And then we can build from that and we can share this back with you. So,
Awesome.
all right.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else before, I don't want to cut you
No.
off, but.
No, thank you
Yeah,
so
Great,
much.
really
Thank you so
appreciate you
much.
guys being here and coming back,
Appreciate
yep.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads to the question I wanted to ask before we got started, diving into the chapters here and the elements here. I'm going to ask staff
Yeah.
if, next, let me start with Martin. I asked you, from the standpoint of the commissioners, any sense on how they're, how they see the progress of our plan, or?
Yeah,
how
I
we're
think that,
tracking?
I update them, and I think the original goal was like, we're gonna probably have something by May or June, and it looks like we might slip a little bit there, and that's okay. Like, I think, like I told you offline, that the important thing for the commissioners, I get the sense, is that, it's a good plan, take your time and write a good plan. They know we're not skipping meetings and all, we're working on it hard, so I think, they're comfortable with it, near as I can tell. Yeah, and I can ask them specifically and check and, let you know next time, but.
It's not really, to me, it's not a question for them, it's just a,
Yeah, no, I get,
Do we need to, was there some other communication we need to send them so that they know where we are, but you're doing a good job of.
No,
keeping them
I
updated,
definitely, every time, I give an update, I talk about, when this is expected to be done. We'll talk about that a little bit more, and I can update them on that, but yeah, I think everything, no one's sounded irritated or like,
Right.
is this done yet kind of thing, like, but they do want to know, so.
Yep. Thank you for doing a good job of keeping them updated. And I was gonna ask staff the same thing.
Yeah.
Are we, how are we tracking with what you're needing from us? Are you
I think
getting-
we're tracking pretty well. I think part of, there's 2 points that I would make. One is just, we've gotten feedback. If you have more feedback, to share it. Also, with, as I said in the emails the last couple of weeks, I think scheduling an additional session where it's just the comp plan, especially some of what we'll talk about tonight, but especially what's going to come after this, which is land use, municipal growth, and water resources, is going to require sort of a little bit more detailed work, so that's where the idea of having an additional work session that is just the comp plan, we can even just sit in the small conference room, and really dive into it. That's the idea. Over the last, since the last meeting, I've tried to compile every comment that I've received. I know there are some more and some sharing of notes back and forth that still needs to happen. But I think that's where, if we can get into it, especially with these next chapters, we'll be in pretty good stead, because then we just have a few last, smaller things after that. It's really the next chunk where we want to utilize some extra time.
I asked this not just because I care your opinions, but also because I feel like, especially in the last meeting, I felt like, are we getting anywhere? Right? And then Chuck asked the question about where are we, what have we done? And we don't really have that concise tracker. That's why that thought came into my head.
If I may, one of the things I wanted to bring up and ask, one piece of context. Knee-jerk reaction is I feel like there's some issues that we ran into in 2010 that we're hitting again right now. And my first one is, what's the outline? When I'm doing a group writing project, the first thing that always gets done is an annotated outline. Outline so you know what is going to be there, and the annotation so we can all have a common understanding of each section. I also worry that let's try this a different way. We do not have a set outline we have to follow. We have a set of elements that have to be there, and other things can be there as well. And we fought with that in 2010 as well, and just for context. But I really would like to see before we get into any sections, what is a list of what the proposed sections are, and what are they intended to cover? Because looking at individual sections without context makes it really hard to answer the question of, I have this comment, oh no, but that should be over in this section. So looking at an isolation can be problematic.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where I'm going too, is that, but the first thing we looked at early on was this almost like an MS project plan, right? That just,
Right.
And that's not what we need to see. I don't think want to.
No, I understand.
But when we meet, when we have things to go, it would be very helpful, I think, for us to see where this fits into the entire plan.
Sure.
And where we are in terms of progress towards completion of certain goals. I think, and I'm sure that you have sent this to us in different forms, but something short and concise that's in front of us at every turn, I think would be very helpful.
I think we can do that, and I think just having
Yeah.
updates on that will work out. As I said, we've done a lot so far, but there's also, some of the bigger topics or the main focus of the plan from a planning perspective is to come, so.
I was just thinking, didn't we have a Gantt chart early on in development? And
Yeah.
can
those
we
in-
get an
those
updated
initial.
version of that? Thank you.
Sure. So there's a lot of kind of loose ends we're here, so why don't we start with those, because I think the conversation already to date is very relevant. So just as general statement about comp plans in general, so they are guidance documents, right? It's really the ordinances that are the implementation of the zoning primarily, but there are other ordinances and implementation actions and items that you have that you review and also the council does. So this is your plan, and however you want to develop it is the way that we're going to make it happen. So our general guidance here in Maryland is using the 12 visions. I mean, you really can't go wrong with those, because I think that's a good general outline for doing comprehensive plans. And that's how they're reviewed, that's how they're commented on by the state and state agencies, et cetera. And so when we get to the end of the process, it's just helpful to have those elements in there, because if we miss one of them, or we omit, or we kind of underemphasize it or skip it, we're going to get that comment, well, you really need to do more about that. So that's why we use that as the guide. But that doesn't mean you have to do it that way. So for example, like if you wanted to do a sustainability chapter or any other kind of thematic chapter, we could do that as well. Because as you know, there's a lot of overlap within each of these visions in terms of, what land use isn't just, what happens on the ground, but there's all the other implications for public facilities, transportation, et cetera, et cetera. So it is challenging to kind of write that up as one document without having a lot of cross-references, because it doesn't all fit neatly into those packages. So, And as you probably don't know, I joined Wallace Montgomery several months into this process, and so at the beginning, I've just been kind of implementing what was in place and using your meetings monthly as that opportunity to share the elements with you. Now, I will note that usually, and I'm actually in the process of scoping out some new projects, typically I would try to do the land use at the beginning, because once you get that in place, then you can use that information throughout. So the fact that we've waited to kind of the middle towards the second half of the plan process means that we don't have all that information together. And as we talked about, I think 2 meetings ago, we have been working with the staff to update the GIS layers and create the maps that we're using for that purpose. And I think we've since last time sent out a link for you all to have that web app so you can actually go in there yourself. And there were some tweaks for the future land use that we just got back from staff, and we're going to integrate that. And that's the kind of data and information that we need to do the next thing. So, but absolutely, in fact, I'm in the process of kind of revising the schedule based on where we are right now and what we need to get done. And I appreciate Niles reaching out to us, suggesting that we have some additional meetings with you all, because I think we need that to not only keep it on track and get it done, but also to have the time to have the discussion so that we're all clear at this, because that is the challenge because there's also a bunch of different models about how you could do this. I mean, the town could have appointed a separate steering committee of other folks, including the planning commission. Often it's a very staff-driven process where we work very closely with the planning directors and et cetera. Or there's a hybrid. There's a whole bunch of different ways that we can do it. So I appreciate that, and we've always appreciated, even before I was here, Wallace Montgomery, working with you and the commissioners being very engaged in this process. I mean, that's always excellent. I think I've said that every single time, because that way what I'm trying to do is get to a consensus with you all about what needs to be in the document. And so we use our guidance, the 12 Visions outline, as kind of our starting point. But as we dig in a little bit deeper, we're trying to make it customized not only to the town, but to some of the particular concerns and issues that exist right now. So, that's an art a little bit, obviously, as we know. From the big picture standpoint, and it's a little bit backwards. If you want to, in terms of my, when I put, you can go to the top of the first slide, because I think I did want to talk about process and next steps, and so kind of starting there. Then we have one of the elements, which is the environmental resources and sensitive areas, which includes some sustainability elements in it and could definitely have more. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to, as we have every single time, in terms of next steps, we'd like to, if we can't set it up tonight, at least identify a couple of workshops. And in fact, kind of in between your meetings, I was thinking initially with Niles that maybe in 2 weeks we would come back, figure out a time that would work best with you all, dive into that land use, and then, then we'll come back again for the next planning commission, and maybe there'll be another workshop after that. So that'll also kind of serve a couple purposes. One is it'll give us enough time to walk through this with you and get your input, but then also, then we're not necessarily tied to the monthly kind of planning commission schedule, because I'm also cognizant that you have other items as well, like you did last month, that, there's only so much time that we have and only so much time that you have. And we're trying to be fair to everybody in terms of what doing that. So I think there's a couple purposes by having these workshops, is that we can actually dive in a little further and make sure we're making the time for it while also, keeping to the bigger schedule. Overall, we're not too bad. I mean, we're not maybe a month or two away from being done, just because we have to work through those issues and make sure we have that conversation and discussion with you all and take that input in and incorporate it in the plan document. But like I was saying, and I've said several times, the land use is really the guts of it. And having that redevelopment conversation was something that I think we flagged earlier in the input item. So that we'd already kind of proposed that for inclusion in that conversation. So really what we've been doing is kind of working on parallel tracks in a way. I've been working with our staff to get the elements so that at least for every planning commission meeting that there's an element for you to review. And then kind of separately, we've been working on the mapping and analysis for the other parts. So primarily, as we talked about with the land use map, because that's, the calculations from the map will give us the elements to do the growth element and the water resources element with, in addition to some of the other data that we have from the town. So that'll be the next step. And like I was saying, kind of at the outset, based on that, once we actually set these meetings, I will then give you an updated schedule with where we are at for all of the elements. And so at this point, you know, in the process, if you all wanted us to enhance or expand one of the chapters to incorporate a little bit more on sustainability, let's get some examples. And then have some conversation about, as we review this and as you review those other examples, if there's some elements that you would like us to include in the existing chapters, or if we want to kind of rebrand one of these chapters as a sustainability one, we can certainly do that. There's no problem with it. It's your document, again. So in terms of the review and the 12 elements, or the 12 visions, there's basically a checklist that the state has to just make sure that everything is being addressed and then how it's being addressed. And so if there are some gaps, we will get some comments back, but we know what they are. So, you know, that's the way it goes. And this is a very common question that folks have. In fact, our Aberdeen plan was just approved Monday night by the city council and the mayor over there. And the questions they were having at their council level was, well, is this a guidance document, or how specific? It's a very question that you asked, they were asking, which is, you know, how specific does it need to be? Because again, it's going to be your guidepost 5 years, 10 years from now, when you do the next plan, like, well, what have we done since then? And for our implementation chapter, the reason we have that is we have all of the kind of goals, objectives, action items in one location. So once you have the plan, you know, basically the day after you adopt it, you're going to be working on it, and then you can use that as a guidepost, et cetera. But 2 weeks later, there may be a whole new issue that comes up that it wasn't adequately addressed, and then you know, you can use that as guidance, but you might have to start over to some degree. Hopefully not, because there'll be some good information and data, et cetera. But that's kind of how it works. So anyway, sorry for that kind of brain dump there, but those were the loose ends that I think we're looking at.
Do we want to talk about scheduling now?
Okay.
You don't have any of that, do you? We want to stick to, you know, 2 Wednesdays, 2 weeks on a Wednesday in between? Yeah. Okay.
What time?
Okay.
Same bad time, same bad time?
So, yeah, I can do earlier or later also.
Okay.
7?
Okay.
Are we talking about like a marathon, like a 3-hour?
Well, so there's flexibility. We don't have to do it in the evening, whatever, and if you want to coordinate with Niles and come up with something that week, I'm flexible, we're flexible. We're probably gonna have Nick with us to run the board, so to speak, for the mapping. Because he may, often when we do this, he'll mark up things as we go along.
So we're,
If this has the potential to be like a 2.5 hour session, do we want to move it up a little, maybe make it 6 or 6:30, so we're not, you know, I get up at 5 in the morning. most
Right.
days, so-
yeah.
For me, maybe there's only,
All right.
so yeah, we'll set that date,
Okay.
and then we will,
Confirm on the time, or
confirm the time.
What was it, 26th?
26th, so it's 2 Wednesdays from now. Well, that was your suggestion, so,
Your suggestion, I just want to make that your schedule.
Okay.
So we'll put that in the email.
yeah.
And
Mhm.
then we can keep in mind that we're trying to keep that schedule so it's easy for everybody.
Yeah.
We'll definitely,
Mhm.
review that when everybody's together next.
I do appreciate that Niles and staff have created like a OneDrive
Mhm.
location where all of the draft elements are, so I think we'll coordinate with Niles
Yeah.
on any text edits that you all have.
Exactly.
And then what I'll also do is prepare 'cause this is what we're also working on. But part of it is just, we need to get these other meetings on the calendar so I can work from them and coordinate with our other staff who are working with us on some of the mapping elements. But what we'll bring to that, and probably send out even beforehand, is just an initial kind of updated chart, which will get to your, and Chuck, I understand you're new, so I'd offered this to Niles, if you want us to have some offline conversation to catch you up, or,
Really want to know what the current sections are
Sure.
going to be.
yes.
Like, now, if I could.
Yeah, I don't know if I have that with me today, but we can,
We got
like,
facilities, transportation, sensitive areas, land use, community growth, water, and what else?
right, right.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I have all my notes here, but anyway, we can follow up with you on an update on where we are, because we have, and a lot of it's already in the OneDrive too,
Yeah.
so. So we can give an update. And
Yes, yes, look in detail, I couldn't find
Yeah, I
an
can,
outline of what the current proposed outline of the plan should be.
yeah, I can pull that. I know some of that was done before I started, I think, so we can check that as well, so. But, yeah, I think the main things that I think are left, outside of what has already been drafted, is land use, municipal growth, water resources, and transportation.
Right.
About the business section,
Well, so, oh, yeah, and economic
Economic
development.
development and
Thank you,
business,
thank you.
correct.
because, just as a note,
Yeah.
it's funny, because I just saw one of my notes from 10 years ago. We did a really poor job on the
Yeah.
business development section last time.
Yeah.
The
Right.
draft of the business section,
Right.
about 12 pages.
Uh-huh.
And I believe the 2011 plan has 2.5 pages.
Right.
So that was the last thing done, and it was very
Yeah.
short-circuited, and I
Right.
think kind of suffered for that over the last 10 years.
Yeah, no, there's
Just an
definitely,
example.
Yeah,
definitely what
no,
I would say.
thank you for reminding me of that, but yeah, that was the other one, so.
yeah, no, there are definitely some gaps in the existing plan, I would say, having done a number of these. But, you know, again, and if you have some specific ideas, especially if there's some historical knowledge, institutional knowledge, history, that's always helpful. So if you want to share that, or if we want to have a side conversation, absolutely. Now, the one good thing is that the town is fairly small, as you know, so obviously larger jurisdictions have more issues because more people and more land area, et cetera. And sometimes they can be a little bit more complicated, but that doesn't mean that we don't try to hit everything that's in the visions outline. So, anyway. So that was a little bit of what I was going to start with and a little bit about what I was going to end with. So we can then go into, if you would like, the Chapter 9 elements. So if you want to advance. So the purpose of this really, and this again, this is general. We can go ahead as we move forward and customize this. If there's other ideas or concepts that you want us to be able to address, please do so. But this is basically, all of these starting points for us are the general guidance about what we know we need to address in the plan. So the purpose of this really is to provide guidance on protecting environmental resources in sensitive areas, streams, wetlands, buffers, floodplains, habitats for threatened and endangered species, steep slopes, and agricultural and forested lands. And I think we then also sent out some updated maps. Some of them we had already previously created. We just got the steep slopes layer from the county last week, so we added that. I don't know if Niles.
I sent that to them.
Okay. So we have them in a separate PowerPoint, but I don't know, did you all print these out as well? Do they have
Yeah,
copies? Okay.
the map, they have the maps and the chapter, and the
Gotcha.
maps are the last pages of the packet, so.
Okay, so those are, if you have any questions about the maps, that is what we came up with. So, we're recognizing that these sensitive areas can be vulnerable to adverse impacts from development activities, residential use, and certain types of agricultural practices. And then, as we noted kind of at the beginning, we also, at least for now, included at the end of this, in fact, all three of the speakers talked about these issues. So there are sections in here about climate change and addressing climate change, as well as kind of the Sustainable Maryland Program and the Sustainable Poolsville Group. So to kind of respond to what Danny, and I forget what your name is, sir? Mark. We're talking about was, typically if if there are some specific things that you all want to pull out from their work or from sustainability in general as goals, objectives, action items, we can do that. There's no reason we shouldn't. But obviously, we'll want to cater that to what is relevant to the town and feasible through the next period of time. So, I mean, because from a planning standpoint, sustainability is a tricky one to work on because it's hard to define sometimes in the context of a comprehensive plan. And so there are actually a bunch of, and this has been going on for more than 10, 20 years now, in terms of actions in this area and how do we actually do it. In fact, sometimes communities have actually, in addition to like a sustainable group, they've actually tried to look at the whole comp plan through a sustainability lens. But that's not what we've sort of started from a more conventional outline. But, there's no reason why we couldn't add more, beef that up. And, again, with your input to us, and if you want for us to look at another example to see if there are some elements of that, the Middletown example, I'm not familiar with that. I mean, I've looked at these elements generally over the years, but I haven't looked at these specific examples to see and pull out, for example, are there some concepts, ideas, et cetera, that are relevant to the town that we would also want to have some analysis and discussion of in this element. So for now, I would say, let's keep this as it is unless you all want to change it either now or in the future. But there is that flexibility to do so. Okay. So if you go to the next one. So in terms of what's in this chapter, and this, Chuck, for you, this is a fairly common outline for how we've been addressing each of the elements. So they all start with goals and objectives. And what we do in there, and this is, what we have in here is kind of a starting point. Often we want to get and drill down a little bit more specifically about some of these items because we will go ahead and copy this into the implementation chapter and have those, especially action items, highlighted so that, like I was saying earlier, you have that as a guide moving forward to look at how to implement and what to do, as well as a way to monitor how it's being implemented. And in terms of future, there's the annual report that's required for the state that kind of pulls together general information from each jurisdiction. And then at the 5-year point, you're kind of reporting back, the progress that you're making. So those elements of this really give you kind of a template for how to fill out that information. So each of the chapters has that section. But then in addition to that, we have our discussion about the guiding principles in legislation. Then we get into the physiography, topography, soils and steep slopes, streams and stream buffers, wetlands, floodplains and flood hazards, then the rare, endangered, and threatened species, conservation lands, and then the two elements that we kind of pulled out specifically, I mentioned earlier, the climate change and the sustainable Maryland Poolsville. So to move forward, so this is really a kind of our first cut at identifying the goals and objectives, and I'll just go through them quickly, and then we can move forward in the conversation, because I don't have anything much more to present other than to answer questions and see if you have any comments or edits from the draft document. So we have to start it off with just kind of 10 of these, and we can add to them certainly and revise them as you'd like. Number 1, preserve and enhance the town's natural environment, open spaces and sensitive areas. Again, very general statement. Prepare for and protect the town's residents from pending impacts of climate change. And that could be one that we may want to pull out something either from you or from the other work to say, well, what are those specific items that we would want to do? 3 is reduce the overall production of waste, including recyclables, compostables, and trash, and divert the remaining waste away from landfills. 4 is to continue to achieve adequate sustainable water resources and water quality. Then we have protect all residents in an equitable manner from environmental impacts. And then to move forward, Provide access to environmental resources to all residents in an equitable manner. Reduce pollution, restore ecosystems, and balance the built and natural environment within the town. Number 8 is share the benefits of a healthy environment, including all residents, workers, students, and visitors, regardless of their background and identities. Number 9 is address energy consumption and investment in sustainable energy to set its course to achieve overall carbon neutrality by mid-century. And again, we could modify that if you wanted to put some other dates in or other language. And finally, investigate sustainable waste management and recycling methods to minimize landfill waste. So,
Yeah. No, you can go ahead first if you want, or.
Well, I was just gonna say, in the last commissioner meeting, there was a document introduced, a resolution?
A resolution, so there's a resolution
A
before.
non-binding resolution about, carbon neutrality and how long it's gonna take the town to get there and that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
okay,
It was not adopted because Jeff hadn't read it, it turns out, but I suspect it will be adopted.
okay.
So is that something you could forward,
Yeah, so,
Michael?
yeah, I figured just once in the process of things, it will probably be adopted on Monday.
Okay.
So we can share that. And that just basically change it for this statement, it changes by mid-century to 2030, basically.
Okay.
For town resources, and then we can expand it from there.
Okay.
And then go from there, so.
Great.
And one thing you might want to add to, it's not a big deal, but it's a bullet point, 3 about reducing waste and diverting the remaining waste away from landfills. You might want to put landfills and incinerators because a lot of the waste in Montgomery County gets burned up the road, and I know a lot of people are trying to work on closing that.
Right.
So that would be a good, just thing to add there, I think.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's a good one.
Sorry, like 3 and 10, the only difference is, the word investigate. We're saying the same thing.
Okay. Yeah, so the first one, in number 3, I think, talks about kind of the reducing the amount, and then the other one is looking at sustainable waste management practices. So maybe we can clarify how that's different.
What's that?
Is the difference front end and back end?
Excuse me?
Well, is it number 3 is to reduce what's being produced from the front end, and the
Right.
second one is to deal with how the waste is managed on the back
Right,
end.
kind of the system,
This is
the
the second
systemic part.
Part of number 3, it's
Right.
fine, just says, and divert
Ah.
remaining waste away, that handles both
That
ends.
is, yeah.
But I don't think it's
We can
too
clarify.
redundant, just maybe, find a different way to stress the differences between the 2 points.
Right. Okay.
Any comments, Chuck? No. Okay.
Yeah, and if,
Just these elements in the goals and objectives.
so again, if you have any questions, comments, edits, I think what we talked about with Niles is if you want to send him text edits, just so he can make those kind of changes on behalf of everyone. But if there are any questions or comments or additions, you can send it to us as well, or note that. And I think, given the conversation earlier, like I said, we'll, as part of thinking about all of the plan elements and the schedule and updating you all, if we can get the sustainability examples, I can look at that and then provide some input back to the group. Again, I'm assuming that the Sustainable Poolsville Committee will have some specific ideas, and maybe the plan commissioners will want to respond to that.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes in 2 parts, because obviously what's in this document, as we talked about, are the specific recommendations that
Right.
Sustainable Poolsville has already made.
Right.
I think for this next segment here, the part is, taking what you can see sort of already, and then take what you guys were thinking of and sort of combining it. And so that's the part where I think is the next thing, is we've sort of taken what you've specifically said, but now conceptually, that kind of part. So that's the way that I think it will go.
Right. So we'll work with you all to
Yeah.
identify those things so that if
Yeah.
we want to add different elements of the element, I'm using the same word, if we want to add other sections to this or other items that aren't already addressed, we'll identify that for you and then develop some language in keeping with it. Or there may be some
Yeah.
further analysis or data that would need to be collected depending on what those items actually are, you know? So that would be,
This whole, chapter 9, the
Yeah.
details, do you read this and like look through it carefully?
So just based on timing and things like that, I go through it. What I've done with the previous chapters is afterwards. So first we get, because the idea that I took from how I'm trying to do this is you get your general ideas, what you want, what you don't want, whatever. And then I go back, and I did this with all the previous chapters. Sort of go things with a fine tooth comb. We look at various things. One thing that we noted is on the Tree City USA stuff, there's some specific language that we need to make clear. Like, for example, our tree board is the Parks and Streets board. That is, under the ordinance, that is in lieu of. So we make those kind of specific changes. But that's looking back, there's some calculations that we've done.
Calculations that I didn't know
Because
where
it- when-
it came from.
Right, so we have to check. But that happens, I go through
Right.
this, and John goes through this, and Wade goes through this.
Because one thing that struck me
Yeah.
about this chapter more than any other is like everything is like very specific, like, you know, rules and regulations that
Yeah.
seem to already be in place for the state and all, and like,
Yeah.
I don't really, I mean, it would take me years to like go through and like
Right.
check, so, but since you're a planning guy, you
Yeah,
probably can
we-
read it and.
Yeah, we're checking this stuff for that kind of technical
There's
details.
some other things, if you read, it goes into the community tree ordinance, which has its own issues, but it says, it references private property, and it probably should reference private property with forest conservation.
okay.
Right. So those type of little things, that's what we're doing. We're gonna check all of that, and we've sort of done that as we do through it.
Right. So
Check your trees right now.
I did have some brief conversations with Niles before we finalized this to get some
Yep.
initial input. But
Yeah.
recognizing that, you know, I mean, this, one of the good things about you all being so engaged is you're involved in kind of the sausage-making part of the plan element, so, so I appreciate all the input and I haven't necessarily gone back through, again, maybe for Chuck's benefit here, we've gotten a lot of comments and like Niles was saying, kind of already identified them in the OneDrive set of drafts, but I haven't gone back through yet to kind of reconcile, because we're still in the production of these other elements. So we'll be getting to that quickly, but we kind of need to get through the land use and the growth elements, because those are really the heavy-duty ones. And as I was saying earlier, typically we do that earlier in the process, partly because that way, you know, it kind of gets reconciled early on, and then we kind of move forward. But it's, you know, we're getting to the tipping point of, once we get through those, of kind of getting over the hump, and then, you know, we'll begin to finalizing all the elements, reviewing the final ones, and then making sure we're kind of massaging and editing and cleaning up the existing document based on all the comments, and making sure that it's consistent, et cetera, et cetera. So, yes, but yeah, typically our starting point for these are just the general guidance that's provided, and one of our environmental experts actually worked with me on this, drafting this, so she's actually more of an expert in these areas than I am, especially in terms of some of the NEPA work that we do.
So one of my comments that I had, especially since Sustainable Poolsville Committee is in the very first paragraph of the first part of this chapter, they are called out specifically, and I had made a note that if there is a Sustainable Poolsville mission statement or charge associated with that committee, that it should be included in that paragraph, and if not, they have time to produce one? Thoughts? You have one? Okay. It should probably be a part of that particular paragraph that says what your mission statement is and charges, unless they're going to split off into another chapter, and then it'd be more appropriate there.
No, and we can, what we may want to do then is incorporate a little bit more language specifically as to how you envision that committee interacting with the planning commission moving forward, based on the conversations for the last couple of months. That and instead of keeping it general, to say, hey, we looked at the plan documents and inform, because the committee is going to obviously continue to be working, and so as they draft other findings, we may want to add a paragraph that says, hey, the planning commission will get input from, however you want to do that, and just cite that in here. So that if, for example, later on that mission statement changes, we're acknowledging that that's an ongoing process of communication, so that, your activities are being informed by other things going on within the town, something like that.
Maps are just kind of maps for us to see that that's what's going in. There's really nothing for us
Yeah,
to.
there's a
comment on
couple again, going to that technical question, there's a couple of things that we're gonna have to tweak just related to the most recent developments. But outside that, they are what they are. They're what the data shows. So there's not too much with that. If you have any comments about how they look or presentation, that kind of thing. But for the most part, they are what they are, just,
Just minor adjustments.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I did get a couple of notes from Niles before I
Yeah.
came over today.
Yeah, we can work through those.
Yeah, so everything should, and I don't know if it says it enough on here, this one doesn't have a watermark. This is all draft, obviously.
Right.
So, some of it's a little bit more drafty than others.
I will say kudos to whoever wrote the soil section. I particularly enjoyed that one. That one's very well done.
Yes.
I made notes that this was very. I did not. I did not write it, but I enjoyed it.
Yes, yeah, Cassie from our team drafted those elements, so that's one of her areas.
So you guys, just so you know, I texted Amanda about the 26th, and she can make any of those times work, 6:37.
Okay.
So
It's whatever you guys want to do.
I have no problem with 7. I just think if it's going to be a long meeting, we might want to move it earlier, but.
Yeah, me too.
So, all right.
We can
So
bring
then
our
we'll
dinners with us, right?
Dinner's on Niles, I heard.
We can work on that for sure. Yeah, probably pizza, but it will work.
I'd take pizza over just about anything, so that's fine with me.
There we go.
So 6 o'clock is then?
6
6 o'clock on the
6
26th.
o'clock. Yep. Thanks, Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just to go back to my agenda, so I had updating the project schedule as one of the bullets. So yes, we're in the process of updating that, and then once we get these meetings scheduled, we'll be able to send it out with you, with the
Yeah.
specific dates on. And I'll coordinate with Niles before we finalize a draft for you all, just so we get his input as well. And if
And
John
I
has any-
will just reiterate, I think it's important that it's something that's quick and concise, not the big project plan we saw earlier. You can update that as
Right,
well.
right, no.
Yeah.
But then every time we have, when we're having meetings every 2 weeks,
Sure.
Yeah.
that should be almost like the cover sheet of
Yeah.
what we have.
Sure
This is
thing.
where we are, this is what we've done, this is what we have in front of us.
Yes. Yeah, the only reason I haven't pulled it forward is I think I'm still working on the elements of that, so it's not quite where we started from, but I think we're making good progress, frankly. And again, I've primarily used your meetings as our milestones, and, you know, it's been a little bit difficult, because I recognize you all are volunteers, and appreciate all the time that you put into it, but it is, you know, some of these things, it's a lot of time
Yep.
to digest, understand, ask questions, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a kind of a balance there, and I think where we are, we need a couple extra workshops to work through that
Yep.
in more detail.
So, can you give me a sense, like, are we like halfway done? I mean, just, you know, ballpark guess?
We're close to halfway. Once
Okay.
we get through the workshops with the land use, we'll be well beyond halfway, because the three elements kind of fit together, and a
Right.
lot of the base data that we're gonna generate to do the analysis goes in all three. So then eventually we'll be able to kind of put all three together.
Okay.
And then we'll go back to the business/economic development, and so, you know, look at, and I
Great.
don't have the whole outline in front of me, but
And when I'm reporting back to the commissioners, give me a timeline, like, you know, we'll be done between May and June, or June and July, or, you know, 3 months is fine, like, you know, like. a
early to
3-month
midsummer, I'd say. I can-
Midsummer?
Once I will be able to give you something probably within the next couple days, based on.
Yeah, I can tell, I'll let you know
You let
what
me
he
know?
says,
Okay.
yeah. Mhm.
All right, but if you had to guess, like midsummer-ish?
Yeah, because I think frankly, part of our constraint is because I've tried to present these at your meetings, and I did need to miss one because of some other things going on
Yeah.
around the holidays. But, and also, I mean, giving you half the plan in one meeting, it's gonna be a 6-hour meeting, you know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
That's
No,
not-
I'm not rushing, I'm not rushing you. Don't give us half the plan in one meeting,
That's a little
please.
bit of the, you know, we could do it that way, but then it's like, are we gonna have enough time to actually adequately discuss them? So, I mean, typically, if you look at roughly 12 chapters, you know, doing 2 elements a month, if you're gonna do a monthly schedule, that's about 6 months. You know, so I think, and I don't exactly, because I started in November, I don't know if you were, I think you were already in the process when I started, so, I mean, we're not that. Yeah, we're not that far off, frankly. I mean, usually it's 12 to 18 months anyway.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not.
No, I'm just saying, just rule of thumb, just like typically how long, because again, you can, it partly depends, sometimes there's a lot more public involvement, especially with larger communities, where you want to do a bunch of community workshops and throughout, you know, and then you have large turnouts, and then we're taking that information, and in addition to just technically going through the chapters, we would actually then take the input and say, well, what do we need to change based on all of that, and it's a lot more, just because of the scale, you know, so this is a little bit simplified process, and we don't want to make it any more complicated than it needs to be for everybody's purposes. So, yeah, I think,
You always lose time in summer with vacations and everything else.
What is the review process? So once we put our stamp on it, doesn't it go to the public for a review and comment before what is the review process? Let me just,
Yeah.
full stop.
So once you approve it, there's a public hearing. Then after that public hearing, the commissioners vote on it, and so they can approve it. And then from there, it goes to the state, and the state has their comments, and then we come back and tidy up whatever else we need.
yeah.
Okay.
And
And
that's,
the commissioners could say, hey, this looks great, but like, you know, there's a couple of things we want you to change,
Right.
and send it back to us, and then we adjust it.
I thought there was an extra step in there. Thank you for the clarification.
Of course.
yeah, in fact, sometimes the comments will come in at the very end, even after we have the draft document together. So, yeah, I mean, it's your plan, it's the town's plan, so we're here to work with you to get it done, so. Okay. Excellent.
Right, so we hit your agenda, all the marks, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Anything else we need to discuss about this comprehensive
One
plan?
quick question for Joyce. I'm just making notes to give the commissioners. What was the name of the report that you suggested we read? The
IPCC.
Yeah, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it's a UN,
IPCC?
yeah, it is the AR6. AR6 just came out. There's like, I don't know, I forget how many pieces there are. I wanna say 4 different pieces. The latest, I think the latest was the last piece, which is sort of the big thing. It's, you know, with the news lately, it's sort of gotten hardly mentioned, but with Earth Day coming up, you know, in a week and a half, I think you'll hear a lot more about it in the media.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, look for IPCC and then AR6,
So,
and then executive
You what?
summary.
Oh, thank you.
Lexi just sent the link with it.
I thought you said you said it, but I
we can
didn't
go
hear you.
from there.
Sent
Yeah.
it. We've hit everything on the agenda. Anything else before? Yep.
Make a motion, we adjourn?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye. Congratulations, Chuck. You made it through your first meeting. Oh, sure.